Wonderful.
Perfect. Okay. So I did want to give just a little bit of background on kind of what the collaborative was if you weren't familiar with it. So this is PAMF is a program, like I said, of the Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative, which is well, it's been going on for almost a dozen years now. It started back in 2012. And what the collaborative is this kind of partnership to link people, information, and action. And the mission of the collaborative is to establish communication or facilitate communication among stakeholders across the region. And so these stakeholders might be researchers, managers, the general public, and really serve as this resource center for all things Phragmites, including biology, management, and research. And we have lots and lots of resources. If you haven't checked out our website before, I'd really encourage you to. It has everything from basic kind of how to ID, what are the impacts of Phragmites, where is it found, lots of webinars. I think we're on 50 that we have recorded and archived on the website. So lots of really good information there. We are active on social media, mainly on Instagram at this point, but a little bit on Twitter or X. And we also put together, I think we just sent one out earlier this week, a research roundup, which includes all of the latest research articles that have been published. So definitely check out those resources. But the kind of biggest thing that we do under the collaborative is facilitate PAMF, for the Phragmites Adaptive Management Framework. And I am not going to go too much into the other components of PAMF, but I do want to go over a little bit of a background. Oh, you can see me and I'm holding my phone. Sorry. Is it coming through clear? I'll leave on the camera if it's working.
Yeah, it comes through clear. I think it was fine even if you didn't hold up your phone.
Oh, okay. Well, I can set it somewhere. Okay. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I won't go over too much of the other aspects of PAMF, but I do want to talk about what the different components are and what participation more broadly looks like. So first, what you're going to do as a new participant is enroll a site, and this would look like any management area, so a continuous patch of Phragmites, generally continuous. Sometimes it involves like a larger wetland area that has many small patches. But regardless, one patch of Phragmites that you want to enroll and uniformly manage, that's enrolled. And that enrollment process happens mainly on our web hub, which I'll walk through what that is later. And then you monitor. We'll go over monitoring in detail. Monitoring happens each July, and then that data is uploaded through the web hub, submitted to our model, and an output of that model is management guidance. And management guidance is specific to each management unit. And so if you had maybe 5 management units enrolled in the program, you might receive 5 different guidance packages for each of those management units, depending on specific site conditions. And then you go out and you manage. And the kind of beauty of PAMF is that you don't necessarily have to follow the management recommendations or guidance that we provide to you. You can tell us, this is what we did. Yes, I did or did not follow management guidance, but that data still is able to inform the model regardless. And then the cycle starts back over again with monitoring that following July. And then that information, the 2 monitoring reports plus the management reports that happen throughout the year in between, are then able to update next year's model and create a kind of data point that we're able to learn from. And the cycle repeats over and over again. So monitoring, what is monitoring? I think I called this how to monitor, or how to PAMF monitoring. This is a really well thought out set of protocols that is meant to be easily implemented by anyone, regardless of background. We do have participants who are landowners, private landowners, or private kind of organizations, some industry as well, so no biology background, and that's okay. We intentionally designed this so that any level of kind of background would be able to implement this, but we also intentionally designed the monitoring protocols to make sure that they are going to collect robust data that's going to inform the model and then help us with that learning. That's really the main goal of PAMF. So if the main resource that I would recommend everyone to is the PAMF participant guide, and I can send out a link to that with the recording after this presentation, but that's available on the Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative website under the PAMF tab up at the top, but monitoring is chapter 2. So if you happen to find it, I'm going to kind of walk through the different components of that guide, but that's what I'd recommend everyone downloading or bookmarking, because that is the kind of like comprehensive how-to for monitoring. So just to start with a brief overview, monitoring happens each July. And so it doesn't need to happen the same day in July each year. It just needs to happen sometime within that month. And we selected July because that's when in general, it might be a little bit different in the southern versus the most northern parts of the basin, but this is when Phragmites has reached its full growth potential. It's just starting to maybe put out some flower heads at this point, but you're kind of getting the maximum amount of Phragmites with it's close to maximum growth potential for the year before it moves into the translocating phase and the plant begins to senesce. Monitoring involves kind of two main components. First, you're going to visit 5 different monitoring locations, and at those you're going to place a quadrat, and there's a series of measurements that you're going to take at those 5 quadrats. And then you're going to look at the site as a whole. We recommend, you'll see kind of when I show the monitoring form, that the first question is about estimating percent establishment for the site as a whole, but I tend to fill that out last because once I navigate through the site, I kind of have a better idea of what the makeup of the Phragmites is growing in the site really looks like. And then all the reports are due by the end of the month by August 1st of each year. So if you've enrolled a site before, or if you're planning to enroll a site, I'd recommend enrolling it you can do it the kind of day you monitor, but you're not going to get the those participant or the WebHub established monitoring locations, which I'll show in just a little bit. So I'd recommend enrolling a site a couple days before you plan to go out and actually conduct the monitoring. And if you haven't sites enrolled and you haven't monitored, we'll send you lots of follow-ups just to make sure that you remember that all those reports are due August 1st. So the equipment that's needed, pretty basic. First, you're going to need some type of GPS capable device. This might be a smartphone or a tablet. It could be that you have a handheld GPS or a tablet that has GPS capabilities. I like to do it with a paper form in my cell phone and just have GPS on. The problem with submitting data right now directly to the Web Hub is if you lose internet connection, that it doesn't automatically save on the Web Hub because it's a browser, it's not an app. But we are in the development of creating a fields map app for submitting data with PAMF. So that should be available next year. So some type of GPS capable device, a printout, or making sure that you're really confident you're not going to lose internet connection, something to write with, 1/4 meter squared quadrats, and veneer calipers. We provide the data sheet, the calipers, and the quadrats to you, along with some fun swag in the PAMF monitoring kits. And so those are available to anyone who's interested in participating. For those of you on the line who are going to receive funding for this year through the AMP program, then you will get your monitoring kits mailed out later this week. So you don't need to request them, but anyone else who's participating who doesn't have a kit, you can email me directly, and my email will be at the end. And I would be happy to send you out a kit. So this is what the field sheet looks like. It is customized to your specific management unit once you enroll, but this is kind of the blank general version. And you can see that it's broken into two parts. And so, like I had described before, that first part is looking at the site as a whole, looking at assessing that percent establishment. And then the second part is visiting those quadrats. There is a question in part 1 that asks, has Phragmites been eradicated from your management unit? And so after a couple years of managing, you might find that there are no more live stems throughout the entirety of the management unit, in which case you'd select yes, and then there's no other information that you would need to provide. You could just say yes and go ahead and submit the form. If there are any live Phragmites growing, however, you do want to make sure that you have, oops, on auto. You do want to make sure that you complete the quadrat monitoring, monitoring for each of those locations. So that's just if there's no Phragmites present. So looking at this first part right here, the part 1, I wanted to walk through what these questions really mean. So first, you're going to want to assess percent establishment. Like I said, I like to go through and visit the monitoring locations before I make a kind of designation for percent establishment, because standing on the periphery of the unit, sometimes you can't really tell how much of the stand is living versus past year's dead biomass. I've been fooled many a times looking at a stand thinking it was going to be quite dense and finding that there's actually not a lot of live stems in there because management has been successful. But since Phragmites leaves those stems up for many years, it can be a little bit deceiving. So there's going to be 3 bins for percent establishment. There'll be 0 to 10%, 11 to 50%, and 51 to 100%. I'll go into this more later, but what percent establishment is really looking at is looking at the proportion of the management unit or management area where live Phragmites is growing. And so both of these, you can see that one is a lot less densely populated than the other, but more than 51% or 51% or more of this management unit still does contain live stems. And same with this one, even though there's a lot more stems and it's more dense and it's the management unit itself is a lot more dense, these still would be in the same overall percent establishment. And then one question you'll ask or you'll answer after your first year of monitoring is if Phragmites has spread outside of the boundaries of your management unit. And so maybe you have a management, oops, wow, really getting some sneak previews there. Maybe you have a management area that encompasses all of the Phragmites within a specific area. And if it's spread outside of the boundaries, you might not be managing that. One, because you might not have planned to, you might have the supplies, or maybe it's on a property that you don't have permission to. So that's what we want to capture. So if it's spread outside, it could reinvade, and that's something that's important for us to know. The one thing that I will say about spread is sometimes it's hard to know if it's spread outside one year to the next. So we do recommend taking pictures of your management unit each year. And you can upload those directly to the web hub and save those. And those are there for you to then go back and revisit. Then that part 2 is visiting specific monitoring locations. And so these monitoring locations are really just the spots where you're going to put down the quadrats. And it's 5 no matter what the size of your management unit is. So the web hub, once you've enrolled, it will generate automatically a transect. And so this transect is meant to span either any gradients, so hydrologic or density gradients, within your management unit. And if there aren't, if Phragmites is kind of uniform throughout and you don't have any sort of like part of it is wet, part of it is dry gradients, it's just going to place a line through the longest transect or through the longest path throughout the management unit, and then randomly put those points alongside it. And then it will provide you a list of GPS locations for you to visit. This is something that is a nice feature, but doesn't always help you. And so we do have participant established locations. And I'll go into a little bit more detail soon on why those are useful and how to establish those. But essentially, you might visit a monitoring location and there might not be any Phragmites there, or for whatever reason, you don't have GPS signal, which happens, I feel like, a fair bit, or your phone dies, or whatever it might be. And these just aren't going to be useful. You don't have to go ahead and quit monitoring. You can just establish your own random locations. So placing a quadrat seems fairly straightforward, but we want to make sure that we have protocols in place to make sure that you're doing it in the easiest and least biased way possible. So what we recommend for placing a quadrat is that you build it on 3 sides, and you can see how she has it built on 3 sides, and she's kind of inserting it into the Phragmites patch or location that the GPS has indicated is their monitoring location. This allows you not to have to like throw it over, a 15-foot tall stand of Phragmites. So I wouldn't like glue or assemble your quadrat so that it can't be taken apart. I would make sure that you have it that way. To do it in an unbiased manner, we don't want to walk up to, where our GPS says, look, you've arrived at your location, and find the like most dense or like best looking Phragmites to put it around. You just want to approach it from the direction you were walking, put it out in front of you and drop it, or just toss it gently in front of you. Usually you're going to put it in and there's going to be so much other dead biomass that you're going to have to spend a bit of time clearing out those dead stems to kind of wiggle it down to the ground before you can add that 4th side. And then spend a little bit of time cleaning up that quadrat location. So pull out any stems that aren't rooted within the bounds of the quadrat, and then you can begin your monitoring. And so you can see from the second photo on the right here, how, this is pretty typical, and it's going to be a lot of dead stems mixed in with a lot of live stems, and there's going to be a little bit of cleaning up that you need to do. If you arrive at a quadrat location and there is like, I don't know, stinging nettle or poison ivy, don't put your quadrat there. That's perfectly fine to move it to another location following the participant established monitoring location guidance that we've provided for you. So you've placed your quadrat, and now you're going to do a stem count. And so this is counting only live stems. I'd say at mature stands, we usually find about 8 to 15 stems per quadrat, but this is very much just the kind of norm. There are definitely exceptions. I know that I've personally been to some where it's been treated over many years and you're getting a lot of really little stems. And we've gotten counts well over 100 stems in that small area. However, if you do get that many stems, I don't remember if it's like more than 60 or something in a quadrat, and you go and you enter it into the web hub to submit your data, the web hub is going to prompt you and it's going to ask, are you sure that's right? And that's why we encourage you to, take pictures, go and monitor with someone else just to make sure that there's no misidentification. But that's okay. You can still submit over that, whatever that number is. I think it's about 60 quadrats if you're sure. But in general, you're not going to have that many per quadrat. Then the next thing that you'll need to do is you'll need to measure 3 stem diameters. And so this is where those calipers come in that we provide to you. And there's going to be 3 measurements that you do as close to the ground as possible. I think this is the least intuitive part of monitoring, so I'm going to provide some visuals to help walk us through it. We have, when you build your quadrat, we recommend that you build the 2 black corners opposite each other and then the 2 white corners opposite each other. And this is to help with the stem diameter measurements and selecting which stems. And so we tried to have protocols in place to help you randomize it and not bias your samples. Because oftentimes we'll try to go out if we didn't have these protocols and we'd say, okay, what's the most median looking stem diameter? And we'd measure just those. We don't want to do that. We want to just get a random subset. So what we recommend is getting the one stem closest to each of the black corners and then one in the middle. And so in this case, you'd want to measure this stem, and this stem with the thumbs up. Phragmites doesn't really grow like this. It usually grows like all on one side, like you can see in this patch right here. It's just like all in one corner. If that was the case, you're just going to select still whatever one you feel like is closest to each of the black corners and the one that's in the middle. So in this case, you can see which one it would be. Here's the calipers that we provide to everyone. And you can see, sorry, this picture is a little grainy. You can see that there's 2 kind of sections within the I don't know, the teeth of the caliper. And there is a greater indent the closer you get to the inner side of it, to where you get to the scale. This is measuring for a different scale. So don't put your calipers, sorry for the auto advance. Don't put the stem in this part of the calipers, put it near the opening or near the end, just like this picture is indicating. And then what you're going to look at is you're going to look at where that bottom 0 hash mark lines up with the scale directly above it. And so you can see here that it's 0, 10, 20. This is lining up somewhere between 11 and 12. You don't need to put decimal points, or we don't need to be that precise. We just recommend that you always either round up or always either round down. It doesn't matter, just be consistent with your rounding either up or down. And so you can see this person is putting it all the way on the ground. They don't have it in that upper notch. They have it just below, closer to the end, and they're looking at where that 0 is lining up with that bottom scale. And that's what they're going to record for all 3 stem counts. You might arrive at a monitoring location and there only is 1 or 2 stems within the quadrat. That's fine. You just report that there's only 1 or 2 stems, and then you report the stem diameters for just the ones present within the quadrat. One of the possible annoyances or pitfalls to stem counts and to collecting the stem diameters is when you get a growth form called witch's broom. And this is where you have one kind of node or stem that's growing that is putting off a lot of shoots. This often happens, especially after a couple of years of herbicide treatments, where the stems are like, or the plant is like, oh no, we're dying. We need to put up, as much of our resources as we can to get as much energy to try to, make sure that we don't cease to exist. And so this will happen. A couple years into management a lot of times. And so these are some pictures from the field, so you can see what this growth form looks like. We do have guidance on how to count and monitor these. So sometimes you will see that you can tell that it's obviously a witch's broom, like you see in B of this figure, but the branching is happening below ground versus where the branching is happening above ground. So what we recommend is that you count these as separate stems only if you can get separate stem measurements by putting the veneer calipers or stem diameter measurements by putting the calipers on the ground. So if you could measure these diameters separately because the branching is happening below ground versus above ground, then you would count these as 4 versus this one, where there might be 4 stems, but you count it as 1. So hopefully that makes sense. And then the last thing you do before you move that quadrat, so you've already done your stem count, you've already done your 3 stem diameter measurements. Now you're going to look at all of the Phragmites growing within that quadrat and only that quadrat and look for signs of stress. So there's 3 signs of stress that you might find. There's environmental, pathogen, and insect. I put in some videos here. I don't know if they're going to work. Okay, that one's not important. We'll try to show the other videos. So environmental stress, that might look like wind damage, or maybe there was some type of like fire or something, ice scouring, something that came through and it hurt the plant, something that was not intentional management, something that you did not implement through your management activities. Insect herbivories, this isn't just insects are present. This is you see them actively eating, or you see holes on the plant like this, something that, the plant is looking fairly unhappy. And then pathogen, this could look like black spots or kind of decaying leaves. Note that sign of stress as well. If you are going to indicate that there is stress to that quadrat, it should be on more than 50% of the plants that are in there. If you see like a couple insect holes on a couple leaves on, every plant, I wouldn't say that that's really causing the plant undue stress. That's just kind of like normal plant life. So you wouldn't indicate signs of stress for that. This one is a little bit subjective, so you are able to say, I'm not really sure if you would consider this stress, and select an unsure box, and then upload pictures of what that tentative stress might be. And that could be the case too if you say like, oh, these plants definitely look like they're stressed, but I'm not really sure what's causing it. You can do that as well. And so this stress, just to be clear, is anything that is caused other than by your management. So if you've gone through and you've applied glyphosate like a month before you monitored, the plant's probably going to look stressed. But if it's none of these 3 and you're pretty confident that it's through because of the glyphosate treatment, then you wouldn't mark that there's any sort of external stressors to the plant. Okay. And like I said, upload pictures. So you can upload pictures of the stress, but you can also just upload pictures more generally of your management unit. We like to recommend that you kind of capture at least like one kind of outside of your management unit looking in, just so you can kind of see generally what the stand looks like. But then also it's helpful to collect some quadrat specific imagery as well. And these pictures are to communicate between us, but they're really just for your benefit over time. And it is nice to look back and kind of see the progress that you've made. Okay, so one of the other pitfalls when it comes to monitoring, and this is a big one, is that we tell you every single quadrat that you place needs to have Phragmites growing in it, if at all possible. And so I want to answer the question of why this is the case. And so if we had, here's our quadrat, or here's part of a management unit, and this is where 3 of the locations were. I don't know why they're labeled ACB. That's a little odd, but C would be kind of the not good quadrat, because there are other locations that we could move it where it would have stems. And so this is not, we don't want it to look like this. So let me walk you through an example of why this is the case and how this is not biasing your data. So imagine that you have enrolled a new management unit, and that management unit has a pretty big patch of Phragmites. It's contiguous, growing throughout it. And so this outside green box, this is the boundaries of your management unit, and that darker green, that's going to be live Phragmites. So you have your 5 monitoring locations along this transect that the Web Hub has generated for you, and you go out to them each year, and all of them have Phragmites stems growing within it. And so this is going to be pretty well established spot. Well, now the next year you go out, sorry, this shouldn't say 51 to 100, this should say 11 to 50%. You go out and your establishment has dropped. Since now it's 11 to 50% established, and a lot of the Phragmites has been reduced. And so instead of having this kind of large contiguous patch, you now have 3 smaller patches of Phragmites. And so this transect, it's still the same as last year. The monitoring locations have shifted, but they're still along this transect. And okay, you go out and you're just getting zeros for all of these. Well, what we'd want you to do is to move those monitoring locations into those patches. Oh, okay, apparently this is supposed to be 0 to 10%. So you move those monitoring locations into those patches and try to make it as representative as possible. You wouldn't want to just put them all into one patch. That's not going to give us a great idea of the health. You want to spread it out. And I think this feels like wrong to a lot of us. And I know when I first started on this project, I had to have someone walk me through why this wasn't just biasing the data. And the reason is we're capturing how much of the management unit has Phragmites through this percent establishment measure. And so, like I said, that's the proportion of the management unit that has live Phragmites stems growing throughout it. What the quadrat data is doing, it's looking at the density and the health of the remaining Phragmites. And so zeros, while they might seem like they are informative, because it's like, well, no, there's no Phragmites growing here. That's not what we're trying to capture with the quadrats. We're trying to look at how healthy and how robust that remaining Phragmites is that's left. And so the only time that you would report zeros is if you had so few stems left that you couldn't place those 5 quadrats without overlapping them. And there's no stems left. And so you might have a situation, where you're a couple years into management where you're placing those quadrats and you can only get 3 out of the 5 and there's no other live Phragmites stems. That's perfectly okay. But if there are more stems, then we're going to make sure that we have them measured and accounted for with those quadrats. The other thing that gives folks a lot of trouble, and I've mentioned this, is they arrive to locations and there's not Phragmites there, or they have lost GPS signal, a bunch of things, might have happened where they're not going to be able to use those Web Hub established locations. And in that case, we'd recommend that you use the flowcharts that we've created for establishing individual monitoring locations. So I am going to attempt to show these videos. I feel like I should be able to show these. How does this work? Okay, like if I've embedded a video, I feel like it should. Sorry, bear with me. Okay, I will try to figure it out for the end. So we'll come back to that if we have time. Okay. So the last piece of filling out the monitoring sheet is this optional section. And this is something that we added a couple years ago. So for those of you who've been in these dense Phragmites patches, you know that oftentimes you see other invasive species growing alongside Phragmites. And one of the really common ones is European frogbit. And you can see in this picture, this is Typha, I believe, but there's within these kind of sheltered, shaded areas, you'll see these dense mats or even just a couple of plants of European frogbit. And we want to know if you see that. There's active efforts and actually a European frogbit collaborative as well. And so we're trying to leverage this opportunity to provide them with some additional information on where the species is present. And so this is kind of adding on an additional monitoring opportunity. And so there's just two questions. One is European frogbit present, yes or no? And then two, what's the kind of relative density? Is it sparse? You know, there's just a little bit. Is it kind of patchy within an area? Is it fairly dense, or is there just like a big monoculture? This is very subjective. So don't feel like you need to like really think about what the categories are. It just gives us a little bit more information to pass along to the collaborative, to the European Frogbit Collaborative, to let managers know that, hey, there's Phragmite or there's European Frogbit that we found in these locations. You do not have to do this. This is fully optional. You are also welcome to send pictures to the PAMF email if you do find it, and then we can also forward those along. So just some general considerations when you go out to monitor. We always recommend you go with at least one other person. The first big one is for safety. You're out in some of these more remote areas, and we just want to make sure that everyone is safe. But also it is helpful to do stem counts, especially if you have a really dense, unwieldy unit. To do those with two people so you can kind of compare between each other. Make sure that you have appropriate PPE. Whenever we go out and we assist folks in the field, we make sure that we bring change of clothing, we bring waders, we bring tall boots, sunscreen, bug spray. So make sure that you're prepared to go out, water, of course. And then ticks. We get a lot of ticks monitoring Phragmites. So bug spray is great, but also do tick checks after. So hopefully this overview was helpful, but we do have a plethora of monitoring resources that you can go back to. Once you create an account in the Web Hub, there is going to be a tab that's called Resources. And on there, you'll find a quick guide for monitoring with instructions. That's always helpful to print off if you don't want to take the entire participant guide into the field. There's this blank monitoring field sheet. Like I said, you will have a customized one for each of your management units, which I recommend just printing those off. And then there's a video that's called How to Submit a Monitoring Report. There's also a How to Monitor video as well, and it's just us walking through in the field actually how to collect that data. So go ahead and at least watch the How to Monitor video because it provides some nice field examples, and you can see people actually placing the quadrats, actually walking through some of the motions. And there is all of those resources as well for enrollment. So go ahead and check those out if you haven't enrolled sites before. And again, chapter 2 of the PAMF participant guide, that includes, that covers monitoring. And then you can always reach out to us, either pamf@glc.org, or you can email me directly at sam@glc.org, either one. And you can always give me a call. My phone number is in my email signature, so you should all have that following. But I'll say it now for those listening to the recording. It's 734-396-6055. I am always happy to take a call or an email. So here's the PAMF participant guide. This is where it lives. Here are the web addresses to the Web Hub. which is going to be that site where you enroll and submit all of the resources. Yep, and thanks, Nicole just shared the link to the guide. We do have virtual trainings as well. So there's self-guided training courses on Moodle. And then here's the site. For those of you who are receiving funding, there is a specific training course that you'll need to take. It's called, I think, AMP, AMP. Sorry, I forget what it's called. All these acronyms. Participant training, which is slightly different than the PAMF training, but you're able to enroll in the PAMF training as well. There's also a refresher course, which doesn't make you sign in or create an account, and you can kind of just like hop around to whatever you're interested in. That's a really great resource for monitoring and for all other steps of PAMF as well. For those who might not have a GPS capable device, we do have GPS devices available for loan. You just have to request one and we'll mail it to you, but then you're just responsible for mailing it back to us at the end of the monitoring season. So feel free to request those. We have those ready to send out. Here's all of the other resources that I mentioned. So those like how to monitor, how to enroll, lots of other videos on submitting reports, looking at what the Web Hub, how to use the Web Hub, what it's all about. And then remember, if you are not part of the funding program and you do not have a PAMF kit already, go ahead and send us an email at the pamf@glc.org email address, and we can get those PAMF kits out to you for free as soon as you send us an email. We've got lots of them ready to go. Then the other resource that I wanted to mention is field assistance. So we used to do a lot of in-person trainings around the basin, and we kind of took a step back from those, but we did find that what was more helpful than going out and giving kind of the in-person spiel of PAMF was to offer field assistance at specific management units that folks were hoping to enroll and monitor. So if you are interested in having staff come out and help you, if this is your first time or if you have new staff that's taking over, we are happy to try to accommodate that. We do only have some, limited availability. We wish we could help everyone, but we do have folks from all over the Great Lakes Basin, including into Ontario, and so we'll do our best to try to schedule something with you. But you can email us. Please try to do it before the end of the month to make sure that we can get our scheduling in order. And for those part of the funding program, we will offer that to everyone within the funding program if you are interested, but you just have to let us know and I'll send out more information on that. So if you're ready to join, first step is going to be going to the Web Hub. Nicole, if you wouldn't mind putting that link in the chat too for folks. And the Web Hub is just going to have you create an account. We have the Web Hub is hosted by EdMaps. And so if you already have an EdMaps account, you can go ahead, you can see the kind of how to register. You can skip the first step of registering for an EdMap account, and you can use those same credentials to create an account on the Web Hub. You do have to go through the second step though, before it recognizes your credentials on this website. And then after that, you're able to log in, enroll, monitor, submit the data so we can run the model, which happens in August. We'll give you the guidance in mid-August, and then manage, and then do that cycle over and over again until Phragmites is eradicated.